Hello everyone and welcome back to Next Gen Gaming SC. We are live for round 3 here at the Star Wars Unlimited 4K at SCG CON Richmond. Today's feature match will be Boba Yellow versus Sabine Green. We have David Jones on the left piloting the Boba Yellow deck, and then Blake Edmondson on the right piloting Sabine Green. For those of you that are unaware, David Jones is one of the hosts of a Star Wars Unlimited podcast called Cantina Backup Band. So for those of you who are interested in podcasts and want some good Star Wars Unlimited content, definitely check them out. Now, Boba is a tough matchup for Sabine, and we see in David's deck list, he's running 6 copies of Sentinel units. He's got 3 Cell Block Guard and 3 Gamorrean Guards in the main deck. So his deck a little bit more geared towards the Sabine matchup. The links to both of these deck lists will be posted down in the description below if you want to check those out. So to start us out, David had the initiative on turn 1. He opened with a Viper Probe Droid, being able to look at Blake's hand, seeing the Green Squadron A-Wing that would come down immediately on turn 1 for Blake. David reclaims the initiative, and at the start of turn 2, drops the Waylay, bouncing the Green Squadron A-Wing back to Blake's hand, which is a great play, because it is essentially going to force Blake to waste his second turn. He has to replay the Green Squadron A-Wing, not able to deal any damage to David's base. So after replaying the Green Squadron A-Wing, David comes across for 3 damage into Blake's base with the droid. Now Blake does claim the initiative, but it certainly feels like a really good start early in Game 1 for David, because here we are, about to start turn 3, and Sabine has yet to deal any damage to David's base. Now, we did see Wing Leader in Blake's hand earlier, so now that he has seen David play the Waylay, does he go for a Wing Leader play onto the Green Squadron A-Wing or just attack first? And he's going to go with Wing Leader, so Wing Leader comes down, will give Green Squadron A-Wing 2 experience tokens. But David with an immediate response, he plays cunning, and he is going to return the Green Squadron A-Wing to Blake's hand once again. And he will get to choose one other option here on the card. There's 4 different options or 4 different modes that you can choose from. So he returns the Green Squadron A-Wing, and it looks like the other mode will be discarding a random card from Blake's hand, and he hits General Dodonna on the random discard. Certainly not a bad hit. Another very nice play for David early in this game. Sabine is deployed, and then David is going to go across to Blake's base for another 3 damage with Viper Probe Droid. And then Blake responds with 3 damage of his own onto David's base with Sabine. And that does allow David to claim the initiative. And then Blake playing a Metal Ceremony, which will give Sabine 1 experience token, which will take Sabine's stats up to a 3-6. David with the initiative. Both players up to 5 resources. Boba can be deployed this turn. Now, something that David has to be very careful about in this situation is deploying Boba into a Steadfast Battalion. Blake has Sabine on the board. The Energy Conversion Lab's Epic Action has not been used, which means Blake could use the ECL, giving Steadfast Battalion ambush, and the battalion could be a 7-7, which would immediately take out Boba Fett. So we see the first action. David will play down a Cell Block Guard, so putting a Sentinel down in the ground arena, and that is going to threaten Blake's Sabine, because Sabine has 6 health, and you've got 6 damage between Cell Block Guard and Viper Probe Droid in David's ground arena. So Blake will attack David's base for 2 with the wing leader. It's 5 damage on David's base. Action back over to David. And it looks like he is going to take the Viper Probe Droid, attack Sabine. That will put 3 damage onto Sabine. And now, if Sabine were to attack, she has to attack into the cell block guard, and that would defeat Sabine. So how does Blake respond? He still has all resources available to him, 5 total. Does he use the energy conversion lab here? And it looks like he will not use the energy conversion lab, just playing out the Fighters for Freedom. And David will put out another unit in the ground arena as well. Here comes Crafty Smuggler. And Blake is going to put some more pressure in the space arena as he plays Green Squadron A-Wing once again. And he will deal an extra damage to David's base off of the Fighters for Freedom trigger. And here comes Boba Fett. David has deployed Boba Fett. Now that Blake has used up all of his resources, and David still has the Sentinel unit, the cell block guard in the ground arena. And now with a ready Sabine, Blake has to decide, does he want to trade with the cell block guard attacking with Sabine? It would defeat both the cell block guard and Sabine. He could potentially just claim the initiative, so I think that's probably the 2 big options that he's considering right now, claiming or trading. And he's going to make the trade. So Sabine will attack into cell block guard. That will defeat both units. And then right away, David with Boba Fett will attack and defeat the Fighters for Freedom. And now David with complete control in the ground arena. Blake does have control of the space arena. And Blake will start the next turn with the initiative. But David has certainly done a good job early of keeping Blake's board in check and minimizing the damage coming through. And it looks like Blake is going to start the turn using the Energy Conversion Lab's epic action. And he will play Steadfast Battalion, giving him ambush. And that will finish off Boba Fett. So Steadfast Battalion attacking and defeating Boba Fett, taking 4 damage back. And then David playing the Fett's Fire Spray into space. And that will certainly turn things around in Game 1 in the space arena. The action is back over to Blake. He is going to attack David's base with the Green Squadron A-Wing. That's 3 damage to David's base, 11 on now. And then David will immediately attack and defeat the wing leader with Fett's Fire Spray. And Blake will play another Medal Ceremony. That's 1 experience token that will be given to the Green Squadron A-Wing and Steadfast Battalion, but David will immediately attack and defeat the Steadfast Battalion. Clearing the board completely in the ground arena on Blake's side of the board. And then Blake will put a damage on each base with Sabine's action ability. But that does allow David to claim the initiative. And with David having control of the Fett's Fire Spray in space, he will very likely take out that Green Squadron A-Wing, which is certainly a big threat, can come across for 4 damage. And David wasting no time, taking out the remaining threat in space. On Blake's side of the board, Green Squadron A-Wing defeated by Fett's Fire Spray, and another copy of Green Squadron A-Wing comes down for Blake. And then David will play a Bodhi Rook. And that will allow him to look at Blake's hand and discard a non-unit card. In this scenario, Bodhi Rook will just be information for David. There were no non-unit cards in Blake's hand. We saw the Alliance X-Wing, the Admiral Akbar, and Spec Force Soldier. So Blake does play out the Alliance X-Wing, and then another space unit for David, bringing out the 7th Fleet Defender. Blake has just claimed the initiative, and David will swing with the Crafty Smuggler, 2 damage into Blake's base. So damage count now, 12 damage on David's base, 9 damage on Blake's base. And at this stage of the game, David has complete control of the board. Blake has no units in the ground arena, just 2 remaining threats in the space arena, and David has answers showing in space arena for both of those threats. So David has done exactly what you want to do against Sabine. You have to focus on controlling the board early, minimizing the damage through those first few turns, and that's exactly what David was able to do. At this point, it's going to be very tough for Blake to find 18 more points of damage to win game 1. 3 straight for a cause I believe in would not be enough. And you know, if you're in that situation as the Sabine player, you're in trouble. So Blake will play the Admiral Akbar. That's 2 damage to Fett's Fire Spray, defeating the Fire Spray. And then David immediately coming back with the 7th Fleet Defender, attacking into the A-Wing, which will defeat the A-Wing. And then Blake will go 2 damage to David's base with the Alliance X-Wing. 14 damage on to David's base now. And it looks like David is going to go 3 damage to Blake's base with Bodhi Rook. Blake follows up with Spec Force Soldier. And then David continuing to put the pressure on. 2 damage into Blake's base with Crafty Smuggler. Blake claiming the initiative, and David will throw out 2 more units. Another 7th Fleet Defender and a copy of Gamorrean Guards. And after that last turn, the situation has really not changed for Blake. If anything, it's worse. You now have Gamorrean Guards in the ground arena. And David is showing enough damage on board to finish the game this turn. We talked about it at the beginning of this game. Boba is certainly one of the tougher matchups for Sabine, and it has certainly appeared that way here in this first game. And that is going to do it. Blake will scoop it up here in game 1, and David will take the 1-0 lead here in round 3 at SCG CON Richmond. The players are ready to go for game 2 here in round 3 of the Star Wars Unlimited 4K at SCG CON Richmond. David Jones on the left versus Blake Edmondson on the right. David was victorious in the first game, with Boba Yellow looking to close it out here in game 2. Now both of these gentlemen coming into round 3, winners of their first 2 matches. Both players looking to remain undefeated. David, of course, in a good spot, but we'll see if Blake can force a game 3. Blake with the initiative starts game 2 with Green Squadron A-Wing, and then another very familiar turn 1 play for David as well. He starts with Viper Probe Droid, taking a look at Blake's hand, and we saw Red 3, K2SO, and Zeb Aurelios. Zeb coming in from the sideboard for Blake, and that could be a very impactful play here in game 2 and moving forward in this match. So turn 2, Blake starting with the initiative, 3 damage right away to David's base with Green Squadron A-Wing. And David will play an early answer to Blake's space threats that are coming. 7th Fleet Defender on the board for David, and here comes the Red 3 for Blake. David immediately claiming the initiative, choosing not to attack with the Viper probe droid, wanting to make sure he can immediately answer that red 3 next turn. So with David claiming the initiative, Blake takes advantage of Sabine's action ability, 1 damage to each base. And now David very likely going to immediately take out that red 3, which can be a very real problem if it stays on the board. And that is David's plan exactly. Red 3 defeated with an attack from 7th Fleet Defender. And now the action back over to Blake. Now Blake does still have the Green Squadron A-Wing on board, and he will use the A-Wing to put 3 damage onto David's base. So 7 damage on pretty early this time around. Blake is off to a much better start than the first game. David will respond with a Gamorrean Guards in the ground arena. And that is certainly a strong play in this situation. With Blake on 4 resources, we know that he can deploy Sabine this turn. And the Gamorrean Guards will slow things down in the ground arena. Blake going to play K2SO. And then David quickly claiming the initiative. Blake will deploy Sabine. And it looks like he wanted to attack with the Sabine, but realizing that Gamorrean Guards has Sentinel, Blake will just pass the turn there. And David will start turn 4 with the initiative. Now, we saw last turn that Blake did not give K2SO ambush with the Energy Conversion Lab. That would have enabled an immediate trade with K2SO and Gamorrean Guards and left things open for Sabine to attack. However, we do know that Blake is holding Zeb in hand from the information we got off the Viper probe droid earlier, and Zeb is a great target for Energy Conversion Lab. So David will start the turn with a shoot first onto Gamorrean Guards, giving Gamorrean Guards the 1 extra power needed, and attacks right into Sabine, defeating Sabine, not taking any damage in return. So Sabine defeated without dealing any damage to David's base. But here comes the epic action from Energy Conversion Lab with Zeb Aurelios. And that is a fantastic momentum-swinging play for Blake. Zeb will ambush into Gamorrean Guards and defeat Viper Probe Droid as well. Now, David does come across with the 7th Fleet Defender, defeating the Green Squadron A-Wing to control the space arena. But another 4 damage onto David's base with K2SO. And that is 11 damage on David's base now. David will follow up with a strafing gunship into the space arena. And Blake plays a Metal Ceremony. That's going to buff up the K2SO, and Zeb Aurelios with an experience token. And David will quickly deploy the Boba Fett. Blake claiming the initiative. And Boba Fett will attack into Zeb and defeat him. And with the 2 resources gained from Boba Fett's attack, David will play out a Crafty Smuggler into the ground arena. So that will finish this turn. Damage count right now, we've got 11 damage on David's base, just 1 damage on Blake's base. But David does have a pretty good position on the board right now. Complete control of the space arena. Has Boba Fett and Crafty Smuggler in the ground arena. But that K2SO for Blake is going to do some damage, and Blake's going to play a Fleet Lieutenant. That's going to allow K2SO to attack for 7 damage. And that is 7 damage onto David's base. 18 damage on now. A great play for Blake. And with the initiative having that very large K2SO on the board, he is able to do some major damage immediately. And this really puts David in a tough spot, because now just 12 damage away from losing game 2. He cannot allow K2SO to stay on the board. But when you defeat K2SO, that's going to be another guaranteed 3 damage to David's base. Now, David would love to have a way to bounce that K2SO back to Blake's hand right now. A waylay would be fantastic, but it looks like he's holding Fett's Fire Spray and Cell Block Guard. Now, the Cell Block Guard can slow things down a little bit, but K2SO with the 5 power and Overwhelm would still have damage coming through to David's base and stay on the board. So David really has to deal with that K2SO, because another Fleet Lieutenant into K2SO would be extremely bad as well. So a very tough spot for David. He's going to start with attacking K2SO with Boba Fett. Now that will defeat Boba Fett. 4 damage onto K2SO, and Blake's going to respond with an immediate For a Cause I Believe In. And that's going to be 4 damage to David's base. 22 damage on now. Blake will discard the 4 revealed cards as he will be digging for another For a Cause I Believe In. The Crafty Smuggler will come across, defeat K2SO, but that's going to be another 3 damage onto David's base. Now just 5 damage away from this match going to a game 3. And Blake is going to use the action ability on Sabine. That's 26 damage on David's base, just 2 on Blake's base. David will remove the Fleet Lieutenant with the Strafing Gunship. And then 3 damage to Blake's base with the 7th Fleet Defender. Blake has claimed the initiative. And David will throw down a Fett's Fire Spray. 5 more damage to Blake's base. That's 10 damage on Blake's base now. And Blake, having no units on the board, is going to try and find a For a Cause I Believe In off the top to try to finish this game. That is what would do it. And Blake will take the first action with the initiative. He found it. For a Cause I Believe In. And that will do it. 4 damage to David's base. Blake will take game 2. We are tied up at 1 game apiece, and we will head to game 3 here in round 3 at SCG CON Richmond. We are set and ready to go for game 3 here in round 3 of the Star Wars Unlimited 4K at SCG CON Richmond. David will be starting this game 3 with the initiative. A very quick mulligan from David. It's very likely that he did not have a turn 1 play, and a turn 1 play for David feels like a must against Sabine. David took game 1. Blake took game 2. Now, the double For a Cause I Believe In was very important for Blake in game 2, allowing him to push across the finish line, get the final damage that he needed. However, one of the big turning plays in game 2 was Zeb Aurelios. It was a very patient play from Blake, not using the energy conversion lab on K2SO, saving it for Zeb, and being able to completely wipe out David's ground arena at the time with the Zeb Aurelios getting ambushed from energy conversion lab. Really seemed to completely turn the momentum around, and at that point forward, Blake seemed to have complete control. So it was a great call to bring Zeb in out of the sideboard, and this is not a good start for David. He does not have a turn 1 play, simply has to claim the initiative. Blake will put down a Battlefield Marine and then use the Sabine action ability to deal 1 damage to both bases. And this is absolutely not the start that David was looking for here in game 3. So to start turn 2, David instantly putting down the Cell Block Guard. But here comes a big response from Blake. Wing Leader, 2 experience tokens onto the Battlefield Marine, and that is going to allow Blake to take out the Cell Block Guard and keep Battlefield Marine on the board. Battlefield Marine a 5/5 now. He will have 3 damage on after attacking the Cell Block Guard, but that's a very solid turn for Blake. We did see one more damage onto each base with Sabine's action ability. And now David has to try to figure out a way back into this game. Does he have a way to bounce anything here? Potentially take out the Battlefield Marine? And it looks like he does not have an immediate answer. He's going to play Boba Fett, which will leave the door open for Blake. And Blake's going to play a Fleet Lieutenant. Fleet Lieutenant's going to allow Battlefield Marine to attack David's base for 7. That's 9 damage on. And all David can do here is claim the initiative. So Blake will come across for 2 more damage with Wing Leader. He'll put another damage on each base with Sabine. And then here comes Sabine. She will be deployed. That's another 3 damage to David's base. And then Blake's going to follow it all up with a medal ceremony. This is the most explosive turn we have seen so far at the feature table of this tournament. Medal ceremony giving Sabine, Battlefield Marine, and Wing Leader an experience token. What a start for Blake here in Game 3. 15 damage on David's base through the first 3 turns. That is exactly what Sabine is wanting to do. And everything has went according to plan for Blake. And now David has to try to figure out if there's a way he can get back into this game. David will play a Gamorrean Guards into the ground arena that does currently have Sentinel with Boba Fett in play. And it looks like Blake's going to have another immediate response. Energy Conversion Lab is used to play Steadfast Battalion and give him ambush. And Steadfast Battalion will become a 7/7 on attack with Sabine in play. And that's going to be another 3 damage through to David's base with the Overwhelm on Steadfast Battalion. David fires back with a shoot first, allowing Boba Fett to attack right away. That will take out the Battlefield Marine and no damage back onto Boba Fett. And that did allow David to ready a resource off of Boba Fett leader ability. But Blake coming back across for 4 damage with Sabine. 22 damage on David's base now. Boba Fett is deployed. But Blake will come right back across with 3 damage with the Fleet Lieutenant. 25 damage on David's base, and Blake still has a ready Wing Leader in space that has 3 power. David will have to remove one of the threats in the ground with Boba Fett. And it looks like he's going to pay one to play another shoot first. Attacking with the Boba Fett leader unit into Steadfast Battalion, defeating the battalion, no damage back onto Boba. And Blake does go 3 more damage into David's base with the Wing Leader. Now just 2 damage away from finishing this game. David has taken the initiative, and I think Cunning is the only card that could keep this game going. And it doesn't look like he found it. There's the handshake. Blake will take Game 3. And after losing Game 1, Blake completes the come-from-behind victory here in Round 3 to remain undefeated at the Star Wars Unlimited 4K here at SCG CON Richmond. Thank you for joining me here today for the Round 3 feature match. Stay tuned for the Round 4 feature match coming soon. May the Force be with you, and until next time, take care.